The empty cockpit told the entire story. Captain Sarah Chen's F-22 Raptor sat on the tarmac, its engines still warm from the mission that never happened, while 12 enemy aircraft had simply disappeared from radar screens across 3 different monitoring stations. In the span of 47 minutes, the most advanced stealth fighter in the world had remained grounded, and somehow, an entire hostile squadron had vanished without a trace. The base commander would later call it impossible. The Pentagon would classify it as unprecedented, but Sarah knew exactly what had happened, and it terrified her more than any dogfight ever could. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning briefing at Elmendorf Air Force Base began like every other morning for the past 18 months. Captain Sarah Chen sat in the third row, her notepad balanced on her knee, watching as Colonel Marcus Rivera clicked through satellite imagery of the Aleutian Islands. The projected maps showed weather patterns, flight corridors, and the familiar dance of military aircraft that had defined her career for the past 8 years. Around her, 23 other pilots filled the metal folding chairs that had seen better decades. The room smelled of coffee that had been brewing since 4 in the morning, and the lingering scent of jet fuel that seemed to permeate every building on the base. Sarah's flight suit bore the standard patches and insignia of someone who had earned her place through competence rather than politics, though lately she wondered if competence was enough. The mission parameters were straightforward, or at least they appeared to be. Russian aircraft had been conducting increasingly aggressive reconnaissance flights along the Alaskan coastline, probing American airspace with the persistence of someone testing a locked door. Standard protocol called for intercept missions, visual identification, and the diplomatic dance of showing force without escalating tensions. Colonel Rivera's laser pointer traced a red line across the projected map. Intelligence indicates a formation of 12 Sukhoi aircraft departed Anadyr airfield approximately 2 hours ago. Current trajectory suggests they're heading for our territorial waters. His voice carried the practiced authority of someone who had delivered similar briefings hundreds of times, but Sarah caught the subtle tension underneath. Major Thomas Harrison, the squadron's most experienced pilot, raised his hand. "Rules of engagement, sir?" The question hung in the air with the weight of recent international incidents that had made headlines worldwide. "Standard defensive posture," Rivera replied. "Visual identification, radio communication, escort if necessary. Under no circumstances are you to engage unless directly threatened." He paused, scanning the room. "This is a diplomatic mission disguised as a military exercise. Everyone goes home tonight." Sarah made notes in the margins of her briefing packet, but her attention was drawn to something the colonel hadn't mentioned. The weather report showed unusual atmospheric conditions over the Bering Sea, electromagnetic anomalies that could interfere with both radar and communications. She'd seen similar conditions before, during her deployment in the South China Sea, and they had created complications that the standard playbook didn't address. Flight assignments were distributed with the efficiency of a machine that had performed this task countless times. Major Harrison would lead the formation in his F-22, call sign Eagle 1. Captain David Martinez would fly his wing as Eagle 2. Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh would provide backup support as Eagle 3. The list continued through the squadron's roster, each pilot receiving their call sign and position in the intercept formation. Sarah waited for her name, though she already knew what her assignment would be. For the past 6 months, she had been relegated to ground support duties, monitoring communications, and providing tactical analysis from the Base Operations Center. The official reason was her expertise in electronic warfare systems and atmospheric interference patterns. The unofficial reason was more complicated. "Captain Chen," Colonel Rivera announced, his eyes finding her in the crowded room, "you'll be monitoring from operations. I want real-time analysis of any electronic anomalies that might affect communications or radar accuracy." His tone was professional, but Sarah detected a note of something else. Caution, perhaps, or concern. The dismissal stung, though Sarah had learned to mask her disappointment. She'd logged over 3,000 flight hours in fighter aircraft, including combat missions over Syria and reconnaissance flights along the Chinese border. Her record was exemplary, her skills proven, yet she found herself increasingly assigned to desk duty, while younger pilots with less experience took to the skies. After the briefing, Sarah lingered in the empty room, studying the projected maps that still glowed on the wall. The electromagnetic anomalies were more severe than Colonel Rivera had indicated, and the timing coincided with solar flare activity that could create additional complications. She made detailed notes about frequency interference patterns and communication backup protocols, information that might prove crucial if the mission encountered unexpected difficulties. The walk to the operations center took her past the flight line, where maintenance crews were conducting final checks on the F-22 Raptors that would soon be airborne. The aircraft represented the pinnacle of American air superiority technology, each one worth more than the annual budget of a small country. Sarah had flown these machines in combat, understood their capabilities and limitations better than most pilots half her age. Technical Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez looked up from a diagnostic computer as Sarah entered the operations center. The room was a maze of monitors, communication equipment, and data processing systems that formed the nervous system of the base's air operations. "Morning, Captain. Ready for another exciting day of watching other people have all the fun?" Rodriguez had been Sarah's friend since their days at flight school, one of the few people who understood the frustration of being sidelined, despite having the skills to contribute. Her expertise in electronic systems had kept her grounded as well, though she seemed more accepting of the role than Sarah ever could be. "Any updates on the atmospheric conditions?" Sarah asked, settling into her chair before a bank of monitors that displayed radar coverage, weather data, and communication frequencies. The screens painted a comprehensive picture of airspace that stretched from Alaska to Siberia, a vast expanse of sky where political tensions played out at supersonic speeds. "Solar activity is increasing," Rodriguez replied, pointing to a monitor that showed electromagnetic readings. "We're looking at possible communication interference starting around 1000 hours. Could affect both radar accuracy and radio transmissions." Sarah studied the data with growing concern. The electromagnetic interference wasn't random or natural. The pattern suggested artificial enhancement, possibly from electronic warfare systems designed to disrupt military communications. She'd seen similar signatures during her deployment in contested airspace, where enemy forces used sophisticated jamming equipment to blind American aircraft. The first radar contact appeared at exactly 9:47 in the morning. 12 aircraft in formation, approaching from the northwest at an altitude of 35,000 feet. The signature was consistent with Sukhoi fighters, though the electronic profile was cleaner than expected. Too clean, Sarah realized, as if someone had scrubbed the usual electromagnetic noise that accompanied military aircraft. "Eagle Flight, you have 12 contacts bearing 320. Distance 100 miles and closing," Sarah announced over the radio, her voice calm and professional. The words felt familiar, though she'd rather be speaking them from a cockpit than a control room. Major Harrison's response crackled through the speakers with slight static that hadn't been present during the morning communications check. "Roger, operations. Eagle Flight is airborne and proceeding to intercept." The interference was subtle but noticeable, a sign that the atmospheric anomalies were beginning to affect radio transmission quality. Sarah watched the tactical display as 8 F-22 Raptors climbed toward the approaching formation. The American aircraft appeared as blue symbols on her screen, while the unidentified contacts remained red, their exact type and armament unknown. Distance between the two groups decreased steadily as both formations converged on a point roughly 50 miles from American territorial waters. "Rodriguez, are you seeing this electromagnetic signature?" Sarah asked, pointing to readings that didn't match the standard profile for Sukhoi aircraft. The electronic emissions were too sophisticated, suggesting more advanced avionics than intelligence reports had indicated. "That's not standard Russian equipment," Rodriguez confirmed, her fingers dancing across her keyboard to isolate specific frequencies. "These signatures look more like our own stealth technology. How is that possible?" The question hung unanswered as Sarah watched the tactical situation develop. The Russian formation had split into 3 groups, a maneuver that violated standard intercept protocols and suggested hostile intent. American doctrine called for immediate escalation in such circumstances, but the rules of engagement restricted Eagle Flight to defensive postures only. "Eagle 1, be advised that the target formation has split into 3 groups," Sarah transmitted, though her words were increasingly distorted by static that seemed to intensify with each passing minute. "Recommend heightened alert status." Harrison's reply was barely audible through the electronic interference. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Say again, operations. Your transmission is breaking up. The static had evolved from a minor annoyance to a significant communication barrier in the span of just 10 minutes. Sarah switched to backup frequencies, trying to find a clear channel for communication. Each frequency showed similar interference patterns, as if something was systematically jamming multiple bands simultaneously. This wasn't natural atmospheric interference. Someone was actively disrupting American communications using sophisticated electronic warfare systems. Rodriguez were being jammed, Sarah announced, though her friend was already working to identify the source of the interference. This is deliberate and coordinated. Someone wants our pilots flying blind. The tactical display showed the American formation approaching the first group of Russian aircraft, while the other two enemy groups maneuvered to flank positions that would allow them to trap eagle flight in a complex pincer movement. It was a sophisticated tactical maneuver that required precise coordination and timing, the kind of operation that suggested extensive planning rather than routine reconnaissance. Sarah tried repeatedly to contact the airborne formation, but each attempt met with increasing static and distortion. The electronic jamming was intensifying, creating a communication blackout that left 8 American pilots isolated in hostile airspace with no way to receive updated intelligence or new orders. The realization hit her like cold water. This wasn't a routine intercept mission that had encountered unexpected interference. It was a trap, carefully orchestrated to isolate American aircraft and neutralize their technological advantages. The electromagnetic anomalies weren't natural phenomena but deliberately generated jamming designed to exploit the exact atmospheric conditions that would maximize their effectiveness. Colonel Rivera needs to see this immediately, Sarah said, her voice tight with urgency. She began printing out the electronic warfare analysis that showed the systematic nature of the jamming, evidence that would prove the Russian formation was conducting offensive electronic operations against American forces. But as she reached for the phone to contact the base commander, every monitor in the operations center went dark simultaneously. The communication equipment fell silent. Even the emergency lighting flickered before stabilizing on battery power. Someone had just demonstrated the ability to disrupt the most heavily protected military installation in Alaska. In the sudden silence that followed, Sarah realized that 8 American pilots were flying blind into a trap with no way to warn them and no way to call for backup. The electromagnetic warfare attack had succeeded beyond its designer's wildest expectations, leaving the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world vulnerable to an enemy that had planned this operation with meticulous precision. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She moved to the emergency communication station, a hardened system designed to function during electronic warfare attacks. Her fingers found the controls in the darkness, muscle memory guiding her through procedures she'd practiced but never used in actual combat situations. The backup system came online with a low hum that seemed impossibly loud in the silent operations center. A single green monitor flickered to life, displaying basic radar information that was being received through a different antenna array located several miles from the main base. The picture was degraded but functional, showing the positions of both American and Russian aircraft. What Sarah saw made her blood run cold. The Russian formation hadn't just split into 3 groups. They had disappeared entirely from radar coverage. 12 aircraft that had been clearly visible minutes earlier had simply vanished, as if they had never existed. The American formation was flying toward empty sky, chasing electronic ghosts, while the real threat maneuvered into position using stealth technology that shouldn't have existed. Rodriguez, get Colonel Rivera on the emergency line, Sarah ordered, though she could hear her friend struggling with communication equipment that refused to respond to standard procedures. The electronic attack had been more comprehensive than either of them had anticipated, affecting systems that were supposed to be immune to interference. Sarah switched the emergency radar to a different scanning mode, one that used older technology less susceptible to jamming. The display flickered and stabilized, showing a picture that contradicted everything they thought they knew about the tactical situation. The Russian aircraft weren't gone. They were still there, but they were using some form of stealth technology that rendered them invisible to modern radar systems. The implications were staggering. Russian aircraft weren't supposed to possess stealth capabilities that could defeat American radar systems. Intelligence reports had consistently indicated that their technology lagged behind American capabilities by at least a decade. Yet here was proof that they had achieved stealth performance that matched or exceeded anything in the American arsenal. More disturbing was the realization that the entire mission had been designed to demonstrate this capability. The electromagnetic jamming hadn't been intended to disrupt American operations. It had been meant to force them to rely on backup systems that would reveal the presence of aircraft that should have been invisible. "Captain Chen," Colonel Rivera's voice crackled through the emergency communication system, distorted but understandable. "What's your status down there? We've lost all primary communications and most of our radar coverage." "Sir, we're under electronic attack," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was reporting. "The Russian formation is using advanced stealth technology that's defeating our primary radar systems. Our pilots are flying into a trap." The silence that followed lasted several seconds, broken only by the static that accompanied all communication attempts. Finally, Rivera's voice returned, heavier with the weight of command decisions that could affect international relations for decades. "Can you re-establish contact with Eagle Flight?" he asked, though they both knew the answer. The jamming was too comprehensive, the interference too sophisticated. 8 American pilots were flying blind in hostile airspace with no way to receive warnings about threats they couldn't see. Sarah stared at the emergency radar display, watching as the stealth contacts maneuvered into attack positions around the American formation. The Russian pilots were executing a complex tactical plan with precision that suggested extensive rehearsal. They knew exactly how American forces would respond to their initial approach, and they had prepared countermeasures for every standard defensive maneuver. "Negative, sir," Sarah replied. "All communication frequencies are jammed. But, sir, there's something else. The electronic signatures I'm detecting suggest this isn't Russian technology. The stealth systems they're using are too advanced, too similar to our own classified programs." The implications of her statement hung in the static-filled air between them. If the Russian aircraft were using American stealth technology, it suggested either a massive intelligence breach or the involvement of forces that weren't supposed to exist. Either possibility represented a threat that extended far beyond a routine intercept mission. Rodriguez suddenly looked up from her console, her face pale in the green glow of the emergency monitors. "Captain, I'm reading massive electromagnetic emissions from multiple directions. This isn't just jamming anymore. Someone is painting our entire airspace with active radar systems that are more powerful than anything we've seen before." Sarah switched her display to show the electromagnetic spectrum, and what she saw confirmed her worst fears. The airspace around Alaska was being flooded with radar energy from sources that appeared to be positioned at impossible locations. The signals were coming from the ocean, from mountainous terrain where no radar installations existed, from directions that suggested airborne platforms with capabilities that exceeded known technology. "Sir," Sarah transmitted to Colonel Rivera, "recommend immediate recall of Eagle Flight. The tactical situation has changed beyond all recognition. Our pilots are flying into something we don't understand and can't counter with current procedures." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah knew it was too late. The jamming had made communication impossible, and the American formation was already committed to intercept courses that would bring them into contact with an enemy that possessed technological advantages they hadn't known existed. The emergency radar showed the American aircraft approaching the area where the Russian formation should have been, their flight paths converging on empty sky, while invisible threats maneuvered around them like predators stalking prey. In less than 5 minutes, Eagle Flight would discover that they had flown into a carefully constructed trap, designed to demonstrate American vulnerability in the most humiliating way possible. Sarah watched helplessly as 8 of the world's most advanced fighter aircraft flew blind toward an encounter that would change everything they thought they knew about air warfare. The empty radar screens that should have shown enemy aircraft told a story that would echo through military planning for decades to come. Somewhere in the hostile airspace above the Bering Sea, Russian pilots were proving that technological superiority could disappear in an instant when the enemy possessed capabilities that existed only in classified research programs. The age of American air dominance was ending, and it was happening in real time on Sarah's emergency radar display. She realized that her empty cockpit on the tarmac might have been the only thing that prevented an international incident from becoming a shooting war. Had she been airborne with Eagle Flight, she would have been flying blind like the rest of them, unable to see the trap that was closing around American airspace with surgical precision. The thought provided no comfort. 8 pilots were about to discover that everything they had trained for was obsolete, and Sarah was powerless to warn them from her position in a darkened operations center where even the emergency equipment struggled to function against electromagnetic warfare systems that shouldn't have existed. The next few minutes would determine whether this was merely a demonstration of capability or the opening move in a conflict that could escalate beyond anyone's ability to control. Sarah's empty fighter jet represented more than just a missed mission. It represented the moment when American air superiority entered an uncertain future, where the rules of engagement had been rewritten by an enemy that had kept its most dangerous secrets hidden until now. The silence in the operations center stretched for 17 minutes before the first transmission broke through the electronic warfare blanket. Major Harrison's voice emerged from the static like a ghost, distorted and fragmented but unmistakably human. "Operations, Eagle 1, we have a problem up here." Sarah's hands flew to the emergency communication controls, adjusting frequencies and amplification settings to clear the transmission. Rodriguez leaned over her shoulder, both women straining to understand words that seemed to fade in and out of existence. "Eagle 1, this is operations. Say again your status," Sarah transmitted, though she wasn't certain her words would penetrate the electromagnetic storm that had engulfed their airspace. The reply came in pieces, scattered across several seconds, as if Harrison was speaking through a tunnel that kept opening and closing. "No visual contact with targets. Radar shows empty sky. Something's not right out here." Sarah exchanged glances with Rodriguez. The American formation had reached the intercept coordinates and found nothing, exactly as the emergency radar had predicted. 8 pilots were discovering that their most advanced technology had been rendered useless by an enemy that remained invisible, despite being within visual range. "Eagle 1, recommend immediate return to base," Sarah transmitted, though she knew the words would likely be lost in the interference. "Atmospheric conditions are degrading rapidly." The response that came back sent ice through her veins. Harrison's voice was tight with the kind of tension that came from facing something beyond understanding. "Operations, I need you to confirm something. Are you showing any contacts in our vicinity?" Sarah looked at her emergency radar display, where the stealth contacts continued to maneuver around the American formation like sharks circling prey. The Russian aircraft were so close that they should have been visible through cockpit windows, yet Eagle Flight was reporting empty sky. "Negative visual confirmation," she transmitted carefully, unwilling to reveal over open channels that her backup systems were detecting threats that primary radar couldn't see. The Russians might be monitoring their communications, and any information about American detection capabilities could prove valuable to enemy intelligence. What happened next changed everything Sarah thought she knew about modern air warfare. The emergency radar display suddenly exploded with new contacts, dozens of aircraft appearing simultaneously across hundreds of miles of airspace. The signatures were unlike anything in her experience, showing flight characteristics that defied conventional understanding of aerodynamics. "Rodriguez, are you seeing this?" Sarah whispered, though her friend was already working frantically to isolate and identify the new contacts. The aircraft were moving at speeds that should have been impossible, executing turns that would have crushed human pilots, appearing and disappearing from radar coverage as if they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "These readings can't be accurate," Rodriguez muttered, her fingers dancing across diagnostic controls. "The computer is showing aircraft moving at Mach 5 in level flight, then dropping to subsonic speeds without any transition period. The physics don't work." Sarah studied the display with growing unease. The original 12 Russian contacts had multiplied into a formation of nearly 60 aircraft, all exhibiting flight characteristics that suggested technology far beyond anything known to exist. They moved in perfect coordination despite being spread across vast distances, as if controlled by a single intelligence that could process tactical information faster than human reflexes allowed. Major Harrison's voice broke through the static again, but this time his professional composure had cracked. "Operations? I'm looking at something that shouldn't exist. There are aircraft out here that I can see, but my radar can't detect. They're flying in formation with us, matching our every move." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by electronic noise that suggested active jamming focused specifically on blocking communication attempts. Sarah tried multiple backup frequencies, but each one met with increasingly sophisticated interference patterns that adapted to her efforts in real time. "They're learning our countermeasures," Rodriguez observed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever's generating this jamming is analyzing our communication attempts and adjusting its parameters to maintain the blackout." Sarah realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in military history. The electronic warfare attack wasn't just disrupting American communications. It was studying them, learning from each attempt to establish contact, evolving its capabilities in real time to stay ahead of countermeasures that should have been classified. The implications were staggering. Someone had developed artificial intelligence systems capable of conducting autonomous electronic warfare against the most advanced military in the world. The technology required to achieve such capabilities would represent a quantum leap beyond anything that existed in either American or Russian research programs. "Captain Chen, what's your assessment?" Colonel Rivera's voice cut through her thoughts, transmitted through a hardwired communication system that bypassed radio frequencies entirely. "My pilots are reporting visual contact with aircraft that don't show up on any of our sensors." Sarah hesitated before responding. The evidence suggested they were facing technology that challenged fundamental assumptions about air warfare, but stating that conclusion officially would have consequences that extended far beyond her authority to handle. "Sir, recommend immediate consultation with higher command," she replied carefully. "The tactical situation has evolved beyond current doctrine. We need guidance from levels that can address strategic implications." The silence that followed lasted long enough for Sarah to wonder if the hardwired connection had been compromised as well. When Rivera finally responded, his voice carried the weight of someone making decisions that could affect international relations for decades. "Negative. Eagle flight is my responsibility. I need tactical recommendations based on current intelligence, not political considerations." Sarah looked at her emergency radar display, where the impossible aircraft continued their perfect choreography around the American formation. Each contact moved with precision that suggested complete situational awareness, as if they could see through stealth technology and electronic countermeasures that were supposed to be invisible. "Sir, these aircraft are demonstrating capabilities that exceed known technology by decades," she transmitted. "They're using stealth systems that defeat our radar, electronic warfare systems that adapt to our countermeasures, and flight characteristics that suggest propulsion technology we don't understand." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah had just officially documented that American technological superiority was an illusion, that somewhere in the world, research programs had achieved breakthroughs that rendered the most advanced military in history obsolete. Rodriguez suddenly grabbed her arm, pointing at the emergency display where new information was appearing. The unknown aircraft had begun transmitting identification codes, but they weren't Russian. The electronic signatures matched American military aircraft, complete with authentic transponder codes and unit designations. "That's impossible," Sarah breathed, staring at display data that showed F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning fighters, and aircraft designations that didn't exist in any official program. "Those aircraft are classified above my clearance level. How are they broadcasting authenticated American codes?" The realization that followed was worse than anything she had imagined. The unknown aircraft weren't just using technology that exceeded American capabilities. They were using American technology itself, systems that existed in research programs so classified that most military officers didn't know they existed. "Rodriguez, run a diagnostic on the emergency radar," Sarah ordered, though she already knew what the results would show. "I need to confirm these readings before I report them." The diagnostic confirmed her fears. The radar was functioning perfectly, displaying accurate information about aircraft that officially didn't exist. The stealth contacts were American military aircraft operating under classifications that placed them beyond normal command authority, conducting operations that had never been briefed to conventional forces. Major Harrison's voice broke through the interference one final time, but the words he spoke would haunt Sarah for years to come. "Operations. The aircraft shadowing us just transmitted American identification codes. These aren't Russian fighters. They're ours." The transmission ended in a burst of static that suggested deliberate termination rather than equipment failure. Sarah tried repeatedly to re-establish contact, but Eagle flight had been cut off completely, isolated in airspace where American aircraft were being shadowed by other American aircraft that operated outside normal military channels. Colonel Rivera, we have a situation that requires immediate escalation, Sarah transmitted through the hardwired system. The unknown aircraft are broadcasting authenticated American military codes. This isn't a foreign intrusion, it's a domestic operation. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute before Rivera's voice returned, heavy with implications that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Captain, you're saying that American aircraft are conducting unauthorized operations in our airspace? Sarah stared at the display where the impossible contacts continued their perfect formation flying around Eagle Flight. The aircraft moved with coordination that suggested a level of training and technology that exceeded anything in conventional military programs. They were demonstrating capabilities that officially didn't exist, using systems that had never been disclosed to the forces responsible for defending American airspace. Sir, I'm saying that we have aircraft operating in our airspace using technology and authority that isn't part of normal military command structure, she replied carefully. These aircraft answer to someone, but it's not us. The implications rippled through her consciousness like shockwaves. Somewhere in the American military establishment, research programs had achieved technological breakthroughs that changed the fundamental nature of air warfare. Those programs operated with such secrecy that even senior military officers weren't aware of their existence, conducting operations that could affect international relations without consultation or oversight. Rodriguez had gone pale, her hands trembling as she processed readings that challenged everything they thought they knew about their own military. Sarah, if these aircraft belong to classified programs, then reporting their existence could violate security protocols we don't even know exist. The ethical dilemma was profound. Sarah's duty as a military officer required her to report threats to American airspace, but the threats appeared to be American aircraft operating under authority that transcended normal command channels. Reporting their existence might compromise national security programs, while failing to report them might endanger the pilots currently flying blind in hostile airspace. Captain Chen, Rivera's voice cut through her thoughts with the urgency of immediate crisis. I'm receiving reports that Eagle Flight has gone completely dark. No radio contact, no transponder signals, no radar returns. 8 of my pilots have just vanished. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized the implications. The electronic warfare attack hadn't just disrupted communications. It had created conditions where American aircraft could disappear from radar coverage without triggering emergency protocols. 8 F-22 Raptors had been swallowed by an electromagnetic storm that hid their existence from the very forces responsible for their safety. Emergency protocols, sir, Sarah transmitted, her training taking control when emotions threatened to overwhelm her judgment. Search and rescue assets, Coast Guard notification, international incident procedures. But even as she spoke the words, Sarah knew that conventional emergency procedures were inadequate for a situation that defied conventional understanding. How could search and rescue forces locate aircraft that had been erased from existence by technology that officially didn't exist, operated by forces that answered to command authority beyond normal military channels? The emergency radar display showed the classified contacts dispersing across hundreds of miles of airspace, their perfect formation dissolving as if the demonstration had achieved its intended purpose. Within minutes, the impossible aircraft had vanished as completely as Eagle Flight, leaving behind only electronic signatures that would be dismissed as equipment malfunctions by anyone who hadn't witnessed their impossible capabilities. Rodriguez, save everything, Sarah ordered, though she suspected that evidence of what they had witnessed would be classified beyond their ability to access. Every radar return, every communication attempt, every electromagnetic reading. Someone needs to know what happened here. The electromagnetic interference began to fade as mysteriously as it had appeared, allowing normal communication systems to come back online. Within minutes, the operations center was bustling with activity as staff members worked to re-establish contact with missing aircraft and assess the scope of the electronic attack. But Sarah knew that the crisis was far from over. 8 American pilots were missing in circumstances that challenged fundamental assumptions about military technology and command authority. The incident would trigger investigations that might reveal the existence of programs so classified that acknowledging them could affect national security at the highest levels. Colonel Rivera arrived in the operations center within minutes, his face grim with the responsibility of explaining to higher command how 8 advanced fighters had simply vanished during a routine intercept mission. He studied the emergency radar logs with growing concern, noting electronic signatures that didn't match any known aircraft. "Captain Chen, I need your professional assessment," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of decisions that could affect careers and international relations. "What did we encounter out there?" Sarah looked at the printed readouts that documented impossible aircraft performing impossible maneuvers while broadcasting authentication codes for programs that officially didn't exist. The evidence suggested that American military technology had advanced far beyond what conventional forces understood, creating capabilities that operated outside normal command authority. "Sir, we encountered aircraft using technology that exceeds known capabilities by decades," she replied carefully. "They demonstrated stealth systems that defeat our radar, electronic warfare capabilities that adapt in real time, and flight characteristics that suggest propulsion technology beyond current understanding." Rivera studied the data with the expression of someone processing information that challenged fundamental assumptions about military readiness. The loss of 8 aircraft during a routine mission would trigger investigations that might reveal the existence of programs too sensitive for normal military channels. "And the authentication codes?" he asked, though they both knew the implications of American aircraft operating without coordination with conventional forces. "Sir, those aircraft broadcast valid American military identification codes," Sarah replied. "They're not foreign intrusions. They're domestic operations conducted under authority that doesn't coordinate with normal command channels." The words hung between them like an indictment of systems that operated beyond conventional oversight. Somewhere in the American military establishment, programs had achieved technological capabilities that changed the nature of warfare itself, conducting operations that could affect international relations without consultation or coordination with the forces responsible for defending American airspace. Rivera closed the folder containing Sarah's analysis and looked at her with an expression that mixed respect with concern. "Captain, you understand that this information is now classified beyond your clearance level. Official reports will reflect equipment malfunctions and atmospheric interference during routine training operations." Sarah nodded, though she understood the implications. The truth about what had happened over the Bering Sea would be buried in classification levels that placed it beyond the reach of congressional oversight or public accountability. 8 missing pilots would become a footnote in training records, while evidence of impossible aircraft would disappear into intelligence databases that officially didn't exist. "However," Rivera continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "someone needs to understand what we encountered. Unofficially, I want you to continue your analysis. Find out what those aircraft were and who operates them. The safety of every pilot on this base might depend on understanding technology that shouldn't exist." The assignment was both an opportunity and a burden. Sarah would have access to classified databases and intelligence resources that might reveal the truth about the impossible aircraft, but she would also be responsible for investigating programs that operated beyond normal oversight. The empty cockpit that had kept her grounded might have saved her life, but it had also placed her in position to uncover secrets that someone wanted to keep hidden. As the operations center returned to normal activity, Sarah realized that her career had just taken a direction she had never anticipated. The pilot who had been relegated to ground support was about to become an intelligence analyst, investigating technology that challenged everything the military thought it knew about its own capabilities. The missing pilots of Eagle Flight represented more than a tactical loss. They were evidence that American airspace was penetrated by forces that answered to authority beyond conventional command channels, using technology that existed in research programs so classified that their existence was denied even to senior military officers. Sarah's investigation would take her into a world where classification levels created parallel command structures, where technological capabilities existed decades ahead of acknowledged programs, and where the line between foreign threats and domestic operations had become so blurred that distinguishing between them required clearances that few people possessed. The empty fighter jet on the tarmac had become a symbol of more than missed opportunities. It represented the moment when conventional military doctrine encountered technology that operated outside the rules that govern normal warfare, forcing questions about command authority, technological development, and the nature of threats that couldn't be acknowledged to exist. 8 pilots had vanished into airspace controlled by forces that used American aircraft, broadcast American codes, and demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything in acknowledged American programs. Finding them would require understanding technology that officially didn't exist, operated by organizations that had no official acknowledgement, conducting missions that served purposes beyond conventional military objectives. Sarah's investigation was about to reveal that the greatest threats to American airspace might not come from foreign adversaries, but from domestic programs that had evolved beyond the oversight and understanding of the forces responsible for defending the nation. The technology that had made Eagle Flight disappear represented advances that challenged fundamental assumptions about military command authority and technological development. The empty cockpit had kept Sarah alive, but it had also positioned her to uncover truths that would challenge everything she believed about the military she had sworn to serve. The classified briefing room in the Pentagon's Sea Ring felt like a tomb. Sarah sat alone at a polished oak table that had witnessed decades of military secrets, surrounded by walls covered with maps, showing global threat assessments and strategic deployment patterns. The fluorescent lights hummed with the same electronic interference that had plagued her investigation for the past 3 weeks. General Patricia Hawkins entered without ceremony, her 4 stars catching the harsh lighting as she settled into the chair across from Sarah. Behind her came Dr. Michael Torres from the Defense Intelligence Agency and Colonel Rebecca Martinez from Air Force Special Operations Command. The combination of personnel suggested that Sarah's investigation had reached the highest levels of military intelligence. "Captain Chen," General Hawkins began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 30 years managing classified programs that shaped American military capability. "Your report on the Aleutian incident has generated considerable interest at levels that require absolute discretion." Sarah had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, analyzing data that existed in intelligence databases so classified that accessing them required security clearances she hadn't known existed. The evidence she had compiled painted a picture of American military capabilities that operated decades ahead of acknowledged technology, conducting operations that served purposes beyond conventional understanding. "Ma'am, the aircraft that intercepted Eagle Flight were demonstrating technology that exceeds current military doctrine by generations," Sarah replied, her words carefully chosen to acknowledge classified capabilities without revealing specific details. "Their electronic warfare systems, stealth technology, and flight characteristics suggest research programs that have achieved breakthroughs in multiple fields simultaneously." Dr. Torres leaned forward, consulting a tablet that displayed classification markings Sarah had never seen before. "Captain, your analysis identified specific electronic signatures that match theoretical research programs. How did you gain access to comparative data for systems that don't officially exist?" The question carried implications that extended beyond technical curiosity. Sarah's investigation had uncovered evidence of programs so classified that acknowledging their existence could violate security protocols that govern the most sensitive military research. Her access to comparative data suggested either security breaches or classification levels that transcended normal oversight. "Sir, atmospheric interference during the incident created unique electromagnetic conditions that revealed electronic signatures normally hidden by security protocols," Sarah explained. "The emergency radar systems detected emissions that wouldn't be visible under normal circumstances." Colonel Martinez spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone familiar with operations that existed beyond conventional military channels. "Captain Chen, your investigation suggests that these aircraft represent technological capabilities that could revolutionize air warfare. Why do you believe they were deployed during a routine intercept mission?" Sarah had wrestled with that question throughout her investigation. The demonstration over the Aleutian Islands had revealed capabilities that could change the balance of global military power, yet they had been used in circumstances that seemed designed to remain hidden from conventional forces. "Ma'am, I believe the deployment was a field test conducted under conditions that would provide realistic operational data while maintaining security protocols," Sarah replied. "The electromagnetic interference created perfect cover for testing systems that couldn't be evaluated in controlled environments." General Hawkins studied Sarah with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent decades managing programs that required absolute secrecy. The loss of Eagle Flight had created a crisis that threatened to expose research programs worth billions of dollars and decades of development, conducted under classification levels that placed them beyond congressional oversight. Captain, your investigation has identified capabilities that represent the culmination of research programs initiated during the Cold War, the general said quietly. These programs have continued under special access classifications that limit knowledge to individuals with specific authorization and demonstrated need to know. The words confirmed what Sarah had suspected throughout her investigation. The impossible aircraft weren't foreign threats or equipment malfunctions. They were American technology developed in programs so classified that their existence was denied to the military forces responsible for defending American airspace. Dr. Torres activated a wall display that showed technical specifications for aircraft that officially didn't exist. The designs represented quantum leaps in stealth technology, propulsion systems, and electronic warfare capabilities that exceeded anything in acknowledged American programs by decades. Project Nightfall has been developing advanced aerospace technology for 40 years, he explained, his voice carrying the weight of secrets that had shaped American military capability since the end of World War II. The aircraft you encountered represent the operational deployment of systems that could ensure American air superiority for the next century. Sarah studied the technical specifications with growing amazement. The aircraft incorporated technologies that seemed to violate known laws of physics, using propulsion systems that generated no visible exhaust signatures and electronic warfare capabilities that could adapt to countermeasures in real time. Sir, these capabilities would revolutionize military aviation, she observed. Why haven't they been integrated into conventional forces? Colonel Martinez answered with the pragmatic tone of someone who understood the political realities that governed classified research programs. Because their existence would trigger arms races that could destabilize global military balance. These technologies represent advantages so significant that revealing them would force potential adversaries to develop countermeasures that might eliminate American strategic superiority. The explanation revealed the fundamental dilemma that governed advanced military research. Technological capabilities that could ensure American security also represented threats to global stability if they became widely known. The most advanced weapon systems were also the most dangerous ones to acknowledge. General Hawkins leaned back in her chair, studying Sarah with an expression that mixed respect with concern. Captain Chen, your investigation has demonstrated analytical capabilities that suggest potential for assignments that extend beyond conventional military operations. However, such assignments would require security clearances that would fundamentally change your career trajectory. The offer hung in the air like a crossroads that would determine the rest of Sarah's professional life. She could continue her conventional military career, accepting official explanations that equipment malfunctions had caused the loss of Eagle Flight, or she could enter a world where classification levels created parallel command structures that operated beyond normal oversight. Ma'am, what happened to the missing pilots? Sarah asked, though she suspected the answer would be classified beyond her current authorization to know. Dr. Torres consulted his tablet before responding with carefully chosen words that revealed nothing while acknowledging everything. The personnel from Eagle Flight are participating in programs that require their temporary separation from conventional military channels. Their safety and well-being are assured, but their current assignments are classified at levels that preclude normal communication with previous units. The euphemistic language couldn't disguise the reality that 8 American pilots had been absorbed into classified programs that operated outside normal military command structures. They hadn't been lost or killed. They had been recruited into organizations that existed beyond the oversight of the forces they had previously served. Colonel Martinez activated another display showing organizational charts that revealed the scope of classified military programs. Special access projects operated with budgets that exceeded the acknowledged defense spending of most nations, conducting research that pushed the boundaries of known technology while remaining invisible to congressional oversight or public accountability. Captain, the programs you've uncovered represent the most advanced military research in human history, she explained. They exist at classification levels that require lifetime commitments to security protocols that govern every aspect of personal and professional life. Sarah understood the implications. Accepting assignment to classified programs would provide access to technology that could change the course of human history, but it would also require surrendering the freedom to discuss her work with anyone outside the classified community. She would gain knowledge that few people possessed while losing the ability to share that knowledge with the world that had shaped her values and ambitions. "The choice is yours, Captain," General Hawkins said quietly. "You can return to conventional assignments with the understanding that your investigation will be classified beyond your future access, or you can accept assignment to programs that will provide answers to questions you didn't know existed." The decision would determine whether Sarah remained a conventional military officer or became part of an organization that operated decades ahead of acknowledged technology. Her empty cockpit during the Aleutian incident had positioned her to uncover secrets that changed everything she understood about American military capability. "Ma'am, if I accept assignment to classified programs, what assurance do I have that the work serves legitimate national security interests, rather than organizational objectives that might conflict with constitutional oversight?" Sarah asked, her words carefully chosen to acknowledge her concerns without challenging the authority of the officers who controlled her future. Dr. Torres smiled for the first time during the briefing, recognizing intellectual courage that questioned authority even when doing so might affect career advancement. "Captain, that question demonstrates exactly the kind of critical thinking that classified programs require. The most advanced military research needs officers who can distinguish between national security interests and organizational momentum." The answer suggested that Sarah's concerns were shared by the leadership of classified programs, that questions about oversight and accountability were welcome rather than discouraged. The most secret military research might also be the most carefully supervised, conducted by individuals who understood the responsibility that accompanied technological capabilities that could affect global security. General Hawkins stood and walked to the window that overlooked the Potomac River, where afternoon sunlight reflected off water that had witnessed 2 centuries of American military history. The decisions made in rooms like this one had shaped conflicts that determined the course of human civilization, creating capabilities that ensured American security while raising questions about the concentration of power in organizations that operated beyond normal oversight. "Captain Chen, the programs you would join have prevented more conflicts than they have started," she said without turning around. "The technology you encountered over Alaska represents deterrent capabilities that have maintained global stability for decades by ensuring that potential adversaries understand the futility of challenging American interests." The explanation revealed the strategic philosophy that governed advanced military research. The most destructive weapons were also the most effective peacekeeping tools, creating capabilities so overwhelming that rational adversaries would choose diplomacy rather than conflict. Sarah realized that her investigation had uncovered more than advanced aircraft. She had discovered an entire parallel military establishment that operated with technological capabilities decades ahead of acknowledged programs, conducting operations that shaped global politics while remaining invisible to the democratic institutions responsible for military oversight. "Ma'am, I accept assignment to classified programs with the understanding that my work will serve legitimate national security interests," Sarah replied, her words committing her to a career that would provide answers to questions she had never thought to ask. The briefing ended with administrative procedures that would separate Sarah from her previous military identity, while integrating her into organizations that existed beyond normal record-keeping systems. Her official military records would show assignment to routine administrative duties, while her actual work would involve technology that could change the fundamental nature of warfare. As she left the Pentagon and walked through the Virginia afternoon, Sarah reflected on the transformation that had begun with an empty cockpit and a routine intercept mission. The pilot who had been relegated to ground support was about to become part of research programs that operated at the cutting edge of human technological capability. The missing pilots of Eagle Flight hadn't been lost. They had been recruited into programs that offered access to technology that existed decades ahead of acknowledged capabilities. Sarah's investigation had earned her the same opportunity, placing her at the center of military research that would shape conflicts for generations to come. Her empty fighter jet had saved her life and positioned her to uncover secrets that would determine her future. The conventional military career she had planned was ending, replaced by assignment to programs that would provide answers to questions about technology that officially didn't exist. The classified world she was entering operated with capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about military power and technological development. Sarah's investigation had revealed that American military superiority was built on foundations that extended far beyond acknowledged programs, creating deterrent capabilities that maintained global stability through technological advantages that potential adversaries couldn't match. The empty cockpit had become a symbol of opportunities that emerged from unexpected circumstances. positioning Sarah to join programs that represented the most advanced military research in human history. The underground facility beneath Groom Lake stretched deeper than Sarah had imagined possible. 300 feet below the Nevada desert, she walked through corridors that hummed with the energy of research programs that had shaped American military capability for 7 decades. The walls displayed no identification markers, no unit insignia, no acknowledgement that this place existed in any official capacity. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked beside her, a woman whose credentials existed only in classification levels that transcended normal security protocols. Her work on advanced propulsion systems had remained hidden from public knowledge for 30 years, conducted in facilities that operated beyond congressional oversight or media scrutiny. The aircraft you'll be testing represents integration of technologies that have never been combined in operational systems, Dr. Vasquez explained as they approached a blast door that required biometric authentication from 3 separate individuals. Your background in atmospheric interference analysis made you ideal for evaluating electronic warfare capabilities that adapt to real-time threats. Sarah had spent 6 months preparing for this moment, training in simulators that replicated flight characteristics of aircraft that officially didn't exist. The learning curve had been steep, requiring her to unlearn conventional aviation principles while mastering systems that operated according to physics that challenged fundamental assumptions about aerospace engineering. The hangar beyond the blast door contained aircraft that seemed to belong in science fiction rather than military research. Sleek forms that appeared to shift and flow as viewing angles changed, constructed from materials that absorbed electromagnetic radiation while generating propulsion through methods that violated known laws of thermodynamics. The Aurora-class test vehicle incorporates stealth technology that renders it invisible to radar systems operating on any known frequency. Dr. Vasquez continued, her voice carrying the pride of someone who had spent decades pushing the boundaries of human technological capability. Its propulsion system generates thrust without visible exhaust signatures, using electromagnetic field manipulation that we're still working to fully understand. Sarah approached the aircraft with reverence appropriate for technology that represented quantum leaps in human engineering capability. The Aurora class looked organic rather than manufactured, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed to shift in response to her presence. Control surfaces were nearly invisible, integrated into the airframe with such seamless precision that distinguishing between wings and fuselage required careful examination. Major Jennifer Walsh emerged from behind the aircraft, her flight suit bearing patches that identified programs Sarah had never heard of, despite her new security clearances. Walsh's presence was unexpected, but not unwelcome. She had been part of Eagle Flight during the Aleutian incident, one of the 8 pilots who had vanished into classified programs that operated beyond normal military channels. "Captain Chen," Walsh said, her voice carrying warmth that hadn't been present during their previous interactions at Elmendorf. "I understand you're the one who figured out what happened to us up there. Your investigation probably saved our careers, even if it changed them completely." The reunion provided closure that Sarah hadn't realized she needed. The missing pilots hadn't been lost or killed. They had been recruited into programs that offered access to technology that would define the future of air warfare, opportunities that conventional military careers couldn't provide. "How long have you been working with Aurora-class systems?" Sarah asked, studying the aircraft that represented decades of research conducted in facilities that didn't appear on any official maps. 8 months, Walsh replied. "The transition from conventional aircraft is challenging, but the capabilities are worth the learning curve. These systems can achieve flight characteristics that seem impossible until you experience them personally." Dr. Vasquez activated wall displays that showed technical specifications for propulsion systems that generated thrust through electromagnetic field manipulation. The technology represented fusion of theoretical physics with practical engineering, creating capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about aerospace design. "The Aurora class uses what we call field effect propulsion," she explained, pointing to diagrams that showed energy patterns rather than mechanical components. Instead of burning fuel to generate thrust, it manipulates electromagnetic fields to create localized distortions in space-time geometry. The result is acceleration without mass ejection. Sarah studied the technical data with fascination that bordered on disbelief. The propulsion system seemed to violate conservation of momentum, generating thrust without producing reaction mass that could be detected by conventional sensors. The physics involved concepts that existed at the intersection of quantum mechanics and general relativity. The electronic warfare capabilities are equally advanced, Walsh added, activating additional displays that showed jamming systems capable of adapting to countermeasures in real time. The aircraft can analyze enemy radar signatures and generate interference patterns that evolve faster than human operators can adjust their systems. The demonstration that followed challenged everything Sarah understood about electronic warfare. The Aurora class could detect radar emissions, analyze their characteristics, and generate countermeasures within microseconds of initial contact. The system learned from each engagement, developing increasingly sophisticated responses to threats it had never encountered before. "Your first flight will be a familiarization mission," Dr. Vasquez announced, handing Sarah a helmet that incorporated display systems decades ahead of conventional avionics. "The aircraft's artificial intelligence will assist with flight control until you master the unique characteristics of field effect propulsion." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the helmet. She was about to become one of fewer than 50 people who had experienced flight characteristics that represented the future of human aerospace technology. The empty cockpit that had kept her grounded during the Aleutian incident had led to opportunities that exceeded her wildest imagination. The pre-flight briefing covered emergency procedures for aircraft that couldn't be explained using conventional aviation principles. Standard ejection seats had been replaced with escape pods that could survive electromagnetic interference that would disable conventional safety systems. Communication protocols used encryption that adapted to quantum mechanical principles. "Remember that conventional flight training will interfere with mastering Aurora-class systems," Walsh warned, as Sarah prepared for her first flight. "These aircraft respond to intention as much as control input. The artificial intelligence monitors pilot neural activity and anticipates commands before they're consciously formulated." The cockpit interior resembled the bridge of a starship more than a conventional fighter aircraft. Displays showed information in three-dimensional holographic format, presenting flight data and tactical information with clarity that made conventional instruments seem primitive. Control surfaces responded to touch with sensitivity that required recalibrating muscle memory developed over years of conventional flying. Sarah's first takeoff in an Aurora-class aircraft redefined her understanding of flight. The propulsion system generated acceleration that felt like falling upward, creating G-forces that changed direction without the transitional periods that characterized conventional aircraft. She climbed to 50,000 feet in less than 2 minutes without experiencing the gradual pressure changes that accompanied normal ascent profiles. "Aurora 1, you're showing excellent adaptation to field effect flight characteristics," came Dr. Vasquez's voice through communication systems that transmitted with clarity that made radio chatter sound like ancient technology. "Recommend proceeding to maneuver testing when you feel comfortable with basic flight operations." Sarah experimented with control inputs that would have been impossible in conventional aircraft. The Aurora class could change direction instantaneously, accelerate and decelerate without transitional periods, and maintain stable flight at angles of attack that should have resulted in immediate stalls. The aircraft responded to her intentions with precision that suggested true partnership between human consciousness and artificial intelligence. The electronic warfare demonstration that followed proved that the Aurora class represented more than advanced propulsion technology. The aircraft could become invisible to radar systems by generating electromagnetic fields that bent electromagnetic radiation around its airframe. Stealth wasn't achieved through passive absorption, but through active manipulation of the electromagnetic spectrum. "Aurora 1, you're now invisible to all conventional detection systems," Walsh transmitted from a chase aircraft that was using advanced sensors to track Sarah's position. "Ground radar shows empty sky while you're clearly visible through direct observation." Sarah realized she was experiencing capabilities that had been demonstrated over the Aleutian Islands, technology that had allowed American aircraft to shadow eagle flight while remaining invisible to conventional detection systems. The Aurora class represented operational deployment of research that had been conducted in absolute secrecy for decades. The flight lasted 3 hours, providing Sarah with exposure to capabilities that would revolutionize air warfare when they became widely deployed. The aircraft could outmaneuver any conventional fighter, remain invisible to detection systems, and conduct electronic warfare operations that could disable enemy forces without firing conventional weapons. Landing required adjusting to propulsion systems that could bring the aircraft to a complete stop in mid-air before settling onto the runway with precision that eliminated the need for conventional approach procedures. The Aurora class touched down like a feather despite weighing more than conventional fighters, demonstrating flight characteristics that challenged fundamental assumptions about aerodynamic principles. Dr. Vasquez met Sarah as she climbed down from the cockpit, her expression eager for feedback from someone who understood both conventional aviation and the unique demands of atmospheric interference analysis. Your evaluation of the electronic warfare systems will help us refine capabilities that could determine the outcome of future conflicts. Sarah's assessment would influence the development of technology that could ensure American air superiority for generations to come. Her background in analyzing electromagnetic interference had positioned her to evaluate systems that represented the cutting edge of military research, capabilities that existed decades ahead of acknowledged programs. "The flight characteristics exceed anything I imagined possible," Sarah reported, her voice reflecting amazement that bordered on disbelief. "These aircraft could revolutionize military aviation, but their capabilities are so advanced that deploying them would fundamentally change the nature of air warfare." The observation captured the fundamental dilemma that governed advanced military research. Technology that could ensure American security also represented capabilities that could destabilize global military balance if they became widely known. The most advanced weapon systems were also the most dangerous ones to acknowledge. Major Walsh approached with a smile that reflected the satisfaction of someone who had found purpose in work that challenged the boundaries of human capability. "Welcome to the future of military aviation, Captain. Your investigation made this possible, and your expertise will help determine how these capabilities are deployed." Sarah realized that her career had been transformed by circumstances that began with an empty cockpit and a routine intercept mission. The pilot, who had been relegated to ground support, had become part of research programs that would shape conflicts for decades to come, working with technology that represented the pinnacle of human aerospace achievement. The Aurora class represented more than advanced aircraft. It embodied the culmination of research programs that had operated in absolute secrecy since the end of World War II, developing capabilities that ensured American technological superiority while remaining invisible to democratic oversight or public accountability. Her empty fighter jet had become a symbol of opportunities that emerged from unexpected circumstances, positioning Sarah to join programs that operated at the intersection of theoretical physics and practical engineering. The conventional military career she had planned was ending, replaced by work that would help determine how humanity's most advanced technology would be used to shape the future of global security. The missing pilots of Eagle Flight had found purpose in programs that offered access to capabilities that existed generations ahead of acknowledged technology. Sarah's investigation had earned her the same opportunity, placing her at the center of research that would influence military strategy for decades to come. As she watched the Aurora-class aircraft being prepared for its next test flight, Sarah understood that her journey from forgotten observer to test pilot represented more than personal advancement. It demonstrated that the most important opportunities often emerged from circumstances that initially appeared to be setbacks, positioning individuals to contribute to programs that would shape human history. The empty cockpit had led to discoveries that changed everything she understood about military capability and technological development. Sarah's investigation had revealed that American air superiority was built on foundations that extended far beyond acknowledged programs, creating deterrent capabilities that maintained global stability through technological advantages that potential adversaries couldn't match or counter. Her work with Aurora-class systems would help determine how these capabilities would be deployed, ensuring that technology developed in absolute secrecy would serve legitimate national security interests, while maintaining the strategic balance that had prevented global conflicts for generations. 5 years later, Sarah stood before an assembly of international military leaders in a conference room that didn't officially exist. The Aurora Training Consortium had grown from a classified American program into a multinational initiative that brought together allied nations to share technological capabilities that were reshaping global military doctrine. Admiral Chen Wei from the Chinese Navy sat across from General Hans Mueller of the German Luftwaffe, while Colonel Yuki Tanaka from Japan's Air Self-Defense Force reviewed holographic displays showing flight characteristics that had once been beyond human imagination. The room represented unprecedented cooperation between nations that had historically guarded their military secrets with absolute determination. "The Phase 3 deployment has exceeded all performance parameters," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had become the world's leading expert on field effect propulsion systems. Integration with conventional air forces has proceeded without a single safety incident across all participating nations. The transformation had been gradual but profound. Aurora-class technology had evolved from experimental aircraft flown by a handful of test pilots into production systems that were quietly replacing conventional fighters in elite squadrons around the world. The aircraft that had once seemed impossible had become the foundation of a new generation of military aviation. Director James Patterson from NATO Strategic Command leaned forward, studying performance data that showed capabilities his organization was still struggling to integrate into existing defense doctrines. Colonel Chen, what's your assessment of operational readiness for full-scale deployment? Sarah's promotion to colonel had come with responsibilities that extended far beyond flying experimental aircraft. She now oversaw training programs that taught pilots from 12 nations how to master technology that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. Her students included some of the most experienced aviators in the world, all learning to think in ways that conventional military education hadn't prepared them for. "Sir, we're ready for limited operational deployment within Allied command structures," Sarah replied. Aurora-class systems have demonstrated reliability that exceeds conventional aircraft while providing capabilities that fundamentally change tactical doctrine. The evidence supported her assessment. Aurora squadrons had conducted covert operations across 3 continents, missions that remained classified but had resolved international crises before they could escalate into open conflicts. The aircraft's ability to remain invisible while providing unprecedented intelligence-gathering capabilities had prevented more wars than conventional diplomacy. General Mueller activated a wall display showing global deployment patterns for Aurora technology. Small squadrons operated from bases that didn't appear on official military rosters, conducting missions that shaped international relations while remaining invisible to media scrutiny or congressional oversight. "The deterrent effect has been remarkable," he observed, his accent carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed both the Cold War and its aftermath. "Potential adversaries have modified their behavior patterns significantly since becoming aware that conventional military planning no longer applies to conflicts involving Allied forces. The strategic implications were profound. Nations that had previously considered military options against Allied interests now understood that they faced technological capabilities that rendered conventional weapons systems obsolete. The mere existence of Aurora technology had shifted global power balances without requiring public acknowledgement or deployment. Admiral Wei spoke for the first time, his English careful but precise. "Colonel Chen, Chinese intelligence services have detected similar technological development programs in several nations. How do we prevent arms races that could destabilize regions that have maintained peace through conventional military balance?" The question addressed the fundamental challenge that accompanied revolutionary military technology. Aurora systems represented capabilities so advanced that their proliferation could trigger conflicts as nations scrambled to develop countermeasures or acquire similar capabilities through diplomatic or covert means. "Admiral, the consortium was designed to address exactly that concern," Sarah replied. "By sharing Aurora technology with allied nations while maintaining absolute security protocols, we create stability through controlled proliferation rather than triggering destabilizing arms races." The philosophy represented a departure from traditional military thinking that emphasized technological advantages through secrecy. Aurora technology was too revolutionary to remain hidden indefinitely, but its controlled distribution could prevent the chaos that would result from uncoordinated development programs attempting to replicate capabilities they didn't understand. Colonel Tanaka pulled up intelligence reports showing attempted reverse engineering programs in several non-allied nations. "Our sources indicate that at least 4 countries are attempting to develop field effect propulsion based on electromagnetic signatures they've detected from Aurora operations. Their progress has been limited, but persistence could eventually yield breakthroughs." Sarah had anticipated this development. Aurora technology was based on physics principles that were becoming increasingly understood by theoretical research programs around the world. Maintaining absolute secrecy was impossible when the underlying science was advancing through multiple parallel research efforts. "That's why we're transitioning to Phase 4 deployment," she announced, activating displays that showed training programs being established at military academies in allied nations. Instead of hiding Aurora capabilities, we're integrating them into conventional military education while maintaining security protocols that prevent technology transfer to non-allied forces. The strategy represented Sarah's greatest contribution to military doctrine. Rather than treating Aurora technology as a temporary advantage that would eventually be matched by adversaries, she had developed frameworks for maintaining superiority through continuous innovation and strategic cooperation. Director Patterson studied the Phase 4 documentation with expressions that mixed admiration with concern. Colonel, this approach requires unprecedented coordination between nations that have historically maintained independent military research programs. The political challenges could be insurmountable. Sarah had spent 3 years navigating those political challenges, working with diplomatic and military leaders to create frameworks that balance national sovereignty with collective security interests. The Aurora Consortium represented a new model for international cooperation that transcended traditional alliance structures. Sir, the alternative is technological chaos that could destabilize global security for decades, she replied. Aurora capabilities are too revolutionary to remain controlled by any single nation, but they're also too dangerous to allow uncontrolled proliferation. The assessment had been validated by intelligence analysis, showing the catastrophic potential of Aurora technology in the hands of non-state actors or unstable governments. Field effect propulsion could enable terrorist organizations to conduct attacks that conventional security measures couldn't prevent, while electromagnetic warfare capabilities could disable civilian infrastructure on continental scales. General Mueller activated classified footage showing Aurora aircraft conducting humanitarian missions in conflict zones where conventional military intervention would have triggered international incidents. The aircraft's ability to deliver aid while remaining invisible had prevented humanitarian crises from escalating into regional wars. These capabilities have already changed the nature of international relations, he observed. Nations that previously relied on military threats to achieve political objectives now understand that conventional force projection is obsolete. Quote, Sarah felt pride in the transformation that had begun with her investigation of 8 missing pilots over the Aleutian Islands. The Aurora Consortium represented the institutionalization of knowledge that had been preserved through her analytical capabilities and determination to understand technology that others had dismissed as impossible. The next phase involves training programs that will prepare military leaders to integrate Aurora capabilities into strategic planning that spans decades rather than years, she announced. We're not just deploying new aircraft. We're creating the foundation for military doctrine that will govern international relations for generations. The meeting concluded with agreements that would establish Aurora training centers on 4 continents, each one disguised as conventional military facilities while conducting research that pushed the boundaries of human technological capability. Sarah's vision of controlled proliferation was becoming reality through international cooperation that transcended traditional diplomatic frameworks. As the international delegation dispersed, Sarah remained in the conference room, studying holographic displays that showed global deployment patterns for technology that had transformed her from a forgotten ground support officer into one of the most influential military strategists in the world. The empty cockpit that had kept her grounded during the Aleutian incident had positioned her to uncover secrets that led to opportunities she never could have imagined. Her investigation had revealed not just advanced aircraft, but an entire parallel military establishment that operated with technological capabilities decades ahead of acknowledged programs. The Aurora Consortium represented the culmination of that journey, transforming classified research programs into international cooperation frameworks that would shape global security for decades to come. Sarah's analytical skills had uncovered technology that was changing the fundamental nature of military power and international relations. Her work had evolved from investigating missing pilots to creating institutions that would govern how humanity's most advanced technology would be used to maintain global stability. The empty fighter jet had become a symbol of opportunities that emerged from unexpected circumstances, positioning individuals to contribute to programs that would influence human history. Sarah's legacy would be measured not in missions flown or enemies defeated, but in frameworks created for managing technological capabilities that could either ensure global security or trigger conflicts that would dwarf any previous human warfare. Her investigation had revealed that the greatest military advantages came not from hiding superior technology, but from creating systems that prevented technological capabilities from destabilizing international relations. The Aurora Training Consortium would continue to evolve, adapting to new challenges and opportunities as field effect propulsion technology matured and additional breakthrough capabilities emerged from research programs that operated at the cutting edge of human knowledge. Sarah's vision of controlled technological proliferation would govern military development for generations, ensuring that revolutionary capabilities served collective security interests rather than triggering destabilizing arms races. The empty cockpit had led to discoveries that changed everything about military aviation and international relations. Sarah's journey from overlooked observer to architect of global military cooperation demonstrated that the most important contributions often emerged from circumstances that initially appeared to be career setbacks, positioning individuals to shape institutions that would influence human civilization for decades to come. The memorial service at Arlington National Cemetery drew no media attention, generated no official announcements, created no public records of its existence. Sarah stood among a gathering of fewer than 30 people, all wearing civilian clothes that concealed military ranks spanning decades of classified service. The granite headstone bore only a name and dates, offering no hint of the revolutionary contributions that had reshaped global military doctrine. General Patricia Hawkins approached through the morning mist, her 4 stars replaced by a simple black dress that revealed nothing of the authority she wielded over programs that operated beyond congressional oversight. At 78, she moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent 5 decades managing secrets that could affect international relations for generations. She would have appreciated the irony, General Hawkins said quietly, her voice carrying across the cemetery grounds where American military heroes rested beneath markers that told only partial truths about their contributions to national security. The most revolutionary military strategist of the 21st century, honored with a funeral that officially never happened. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood nearby, her hair now silver with a passage of 15 years since Aurora technology had first achieved operational status. Her research had unlocked physics principles that seemed impossible until Aurora aircraft demonstrated their practical applications in conflicts that remained classified decades after their resolution. Colonel Chen transformed military aviation more than any individual since the Wright brothers, Dr. Vasquez observed, studying the headstone that would never reveal its occupant's true legacy. Yet her greatest achievement was ensuring that revolutionary technology served collective security rather than triggering global conflicts. The mourners represented every major allied nation, though their presence would not be recorded in any official capacity. Chinese Admiral Wei had traveled from Beijing despite diplomatic tensions that made his attendance politically sensitive. German General Müller stood beside Japanese Colonel Tanaka, their national uniforms replaced by civilian attire that disguised the international cooperation that had defined their professional relationships. Major Jennifer Walsh, now wearing the eagles of a full colonel, carried a small metal box containing Sarah's personal effects from Aurora Consortium headquarters. The items represented a lifetime of service to programs that existed beyond normal recognition or acknowledgement, contributions that would influence military strategy for generations while remaining invisible to historical records. She established frameworks that prevented World War III, Walsh said, her words directed toward the headstone rather than the assembled mourners. The Tehran crisis, the South China Sea incident, the Baltic confrontation, all resolved through Aurora capabilities that demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority without requiring public acknowledgement or military escalation. The conflicts Walsh referenced had dominated international headlines for weeks, creating diplomatic crises that threatened to escalate into regional wars. Aurora squadrons had provided intelligence and deterrent capabilities that allowed diplomatic solutions to succeed, preventing military confrontations that could have drawn multiple nations into conflicts resembling World War I in their potential for uncontrolled escalation. Director James Patterson from NATO Strategic Command opened a classified folder that contained Sarah's final recommendations for managing technological capabilities that continued to evolve beyond current understanding. Her last reports had addressed emerging challenges from quantum computing applications and artificial intelligence systems that threatened to make even Aurora technology obsolete within decades. Her legacy isn't just Aurora aircraft, Patterson announced to the small gathering. It's the institutional frameworks she created for managing revolutionary military technology through international cooperation, rather than competitive development programs that could destabilize global security. The Aurora Consortium had expanded beyond its original mandate of managing field effect propulsion technology. Under Sarah's leadership, it had become the primary mechanism for coordinating advanced military research among allied nations, preventing arms races while maintaining technological advantages that deterred potential adversaries from pursuing military solutions to international disputes. Admiral Wei stepped forward, placing a small wreath beside the headstone despite diplomatic protocols that should have prevented his public association with American military programs. His presence represented recognition that Sarah's contributions had transcended national boundaries, creating security frameworks that benefited global stability rather than serving narrow national interests. Colonel Chen understood that the greatest military victories are the wars that never happen, he said, his English carrying traces of the accent that had marked their first meeting 15 years earlier. Aurora technology prevented more conflicts than conventional military force could have resolved, demonstrating that superior capabilities can achieve security objectives without triggering the violence they were designed to deter. The assessment captured Sarah's fundamental contribution to military strategy. Traditional military thinking emphasized winning conflicts through superior firepower and tactical advantages. Sarah had demonstrated that overwhelming technological superiority could prevent conflicts from occurring, achieving security objectives through deterrence rather than destruction. Colonel Tanaka activated a small holographic projector that displayed global conflict statistics spanning the 20 years since Aurora deployment had begun. The data showed dramatic reductions in international military incidents, territorial disputes, and regional conflicts, as potential adversaries recognized that conventional military advantages had become irrelevant against technological capabilities they couldn't match or counter. The deterrent effect has been more successful than any diplomatic initiative in human history, Tanaka observed, studying statistics that would never appear in academic research or public policy discussions. Nations that previously relied on military threats to advance political objectives have been forced to pursue diplomatic solutions because Aurora capabilities make conventional warfare obsolete. Dr. Vasquez opened her own classified folder, revealing technical specifications for propulsion systems that had evolved far beyond the field effect technology that had launched the Aurora program. Sarah's final projects had involved research into space-time manipulation that could enable interstellar travel, capabilities that would make current Aurora aircraft seem primitive by comparison. She was already working on technologies that will define military capability for the next century, Dr. Vasquez announced. Propulsion systems that could enable rapid deployment to anywhere in the solar system, defensive capabilities that could protect Earth from threats that originate beyond our atmosphere. The revelation demonstrated that Sarah's vision had extended far beyond terrestrial military applications. Her research frameworks were addressing challenges that humanity hadn't yet encountered, creating technological capabilities that would ensure security against threats that might emerge from space exploration or contact with non-human intelligence. General Hawkins approached the headstone and placed her hand on the granite surface that marked the resting place of someone who had transformed human military capability while remaining invisible to historical recognition. Sarah's contributions would influence civilization for centuries, yet her name would never appear in textbooks or documentary films that chronicled military innovation. The greatest military leaders are often those whose achievements prevent the conflicts that would have made them famous, General Hawkins said, her words carrying the weight of someone who had spent decades managing classified programs that shaped international relations. Colonel Chen's legacy is measured in wars that didn't happen, crises that were resolved through deterrence rather than destruction. The memorial service concluded with a moment of silence that honored not just Sarah's contributions, but the thousands of military personnel who had served in programs that existed beyond public recognition. Their sacrifices had ensured global security through technological advantages that potential adversaries couldn't match, creating stability that allowed diplomatic solutions to succeed where military force might have failed. As the mourners dispersed, each returning to assignments that would continue Sarah's work and programs that remained classified beyond public acknowledgement, the cemetery returned to its normal quiet dignity. The headstone joined thousands of others that marked the resting places of American military personnel whose full contributions would never be publicly revealed. Walsh remained beside the grave after the others had departed, studying the granite marker that represented the conclusion of a career that had begun with an empty cockpit and evolved into contributions that reshaped global military doctrine. The pilot who had been relegated to ground support had become one of the most influential military strategists in human history. You proved that the most important opportunities often emerge from circumstances that initially seem like setbacks, Walsh said quietly, her words directed toward the headstone rather than any living audience. Your empty fighter jet positioned you to uncover secrets that changed everything about military aviation and international relations. The Aurora Consortium would continue Sarah's work, managing technological capabilities that pushed the boundaries of human understanding, while ensuring that revolutionary military technology served collective security interests rather than triggering destabilizing arms races. Her frameworks for international cooperation would govern advanced military research for generations, preventing the chaos that could result from uncontrolled technological proliferation. Sarah's legacy lived on in institutions she had created, technologies she had helped develop, and conflicts she had prevented through deterrent capabilities that made conventional warfare obsolete. The empty cockpit had led to discoveries that changed the fundamental nature of military power, demonstrating that overwhelming technological superiority could achieve security objectives without requiring the violence that traditional military thinking had considered inevitable. The memorial service that officially never happened honored contributions that would influence human civilization for centuries, while remaining invisible to the historical records that chronicled military innovation. Sarah's greatest achievement was ensuring that revolutionary technology served peace rather than triggering the conflicts it was designed to prevent. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.